Sept Tuesday mornings. Here for you. Here for you.
Here at home, a political firestorm erupted between Republicans and Democrats over immigration.
This border is now an issue in these elections. All these Democrats support everything Biden's done.
The migrants are human beings, and we got to treat them like human beings. They're being used as political pawns.
They are calling for a nationwide abortion ban.
Men in Washington passing laws that know nothing about the human body.
Have you been briefed, sir, on the top secret documents that were found at Mar-a-Lago?
No.
The Justice Department and the FBI to break into and raid the home of a former president of the United States.
President Trump revving up the base 50 days away from the midterm elections. Hi, everyone. I'm Caitlin Huey-Burns coming to you from our Washington, D.C. bureau. Thanks for joining us for Red and Blue. Election day is right around the corner, and both parties are trying to manage expectations. History tells us the president's party should be worried, but after a series of electoral surprises this summer, they might have some reason to be hopeful. Meanwhile, former President Trump held a rally in Youngstown, Ohio on Saturday, where he ridiculed the search of his Mar-a-Lago home and even called Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell a, quote, disgrace. Well, a lot to get to, and we'll get to it with the latest with a couple of my CBS News colleagues. Here on set with me is congressional correspondent Scott MacFarlane. And we also have our own Ed O'Keefe, senior White House and political correspondent over at the White House. So let's get right to this news, Scott. I want to talk a little bit about this rally that Trump had over the weekend, because we saw some really, or heard some really startling images from that rally. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and how it kind of fits into the context of what you've been covering on the investigation side?
Yeah, this week begins in Washington with a lot of discussion about what happened in Youngstown on Saturday. One of the issues was the music played and the gestures made at that rally were symmetrical to, parallel music and gestures associated with the QAnon extremist movement. And there is that possibility, if not that likelihood, that in allowing that to happen at a rally, the former president is either embracing or energizing, galvanizing the QAnon movement. What consequence does that have? Well, we saw January 6th, when any number of people associated with QAnon were part of the violent riot at the Capitol. And in fact, one of those individuals was in court today and named Doug Jensen of Iowa. It was day for his jury trial selection process to begin. Jensen's the man in the QAnon shirt accused of leading that mob toward the lone Capitol officer January 6th. We've also learned from our reporting, not only is Jensen going on trial, but that lone Capitol police officer, Eugene Goodman, is likely to testify this week. So the timing is somewhat coincidental, but you see QAnon impact on January 6th. And now this concern that QAnon's being embraced or emboldened by the former president. Well, and we showed the picture of Jensen. I mean, these images that we've seen of these people, and now, we're 2 years almost into this, and how many are facing juries at this point. But, he was in Pennsylvania. There are other candidates in Pennsylvania echoing a lot of what the former president is saying. And Trump-endorsed candidates who won primaries have been echoing the former president throughout this process. Doug Mastriano, the gubernatorial candidate, the Republican gubernatorial candidate in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, has done the same, embracing the 2020 election fraud claims, embracing the former president's support throughout the race. Now, the question gets to be, for Doug Mastriano and the others, will they distance themselves or husband themselves up to this latest incarnation of Trump rallies? Will they have symmetrical rallies in which there are gestures, which there are salutes? The most recent Mastriano rally had people in the crowd raising their right hands with that type of gesture. That's where this trajectory is headed between now and the midterms. Yeah, no longer these subtle images or sounds, to be sure. Ed, I want to bring you in here and talk a little bit about this Mar-a-Lago investigation, because President Biden, who you cover so closely, was asked about this in a 60 Minutes interview last night. And this was really the first time that we've heard him address this head on. Let's take a listen to what he had to say to our Scott Pelley.
Have you been briefed, sir, on the top secret documents that were found at Mar-a-Lago?
No.
No one has come to you to warn you that important national security secrets were revealed by the storage of those documents at the former president's home.
I have not personally spoken to anyone on that in that regard.
And Ed, further on in that interview, he talked about his own personal reaction to seeing the photos of the documents that we all saw. But what's interesting to me, and I want to get your take on this, is that, you know, President Biden talks a lot about MAGA Republicans on the trail. He's using that as part of his campaign pitch, but he hasn't really waded into this specific conversation about the investigation. Why is that, and what else did he say in that interview?
Because the more he talks about it, the more it can be used against him in the court of House Republican-led committees next year, potentially. Let's put it that way. There has been a blanket policy here at the White House to not engage directly with the Justice Department on any kind of investigative matter like this since the start of the administration. It's partly why he picked someone like Merrick Garland, who he didn't know well, but who he knew could help, in his view at least, restore faith and trust and professionalism at the Justice Department, but they're not close. There was no heads up given. The president and other senior officials have said ahead of that Mar-a-Lago raid, and as you heard him say in the interview last night, he didn't want to know about it, and he hasn't asked about it, because he doesn't want to be seen as engaging or interfering in ongoing investigations or now in the ongoing review of the information that the Director of National Intelligence is looking into, whether there were any real risks associated with having this information out there. And you know, it's a policy that spreads to the rest of the West Wing staff, that they don't have much contact with the Justice Department either. So it was telling that this was the first time since that raid in August that the president has spoken more expansively about it, because Scott called out the photo, the infamous photo of the documents that were found in the Florida home, and in essence forced the president to respond to it in a way we haven't been able to ask him, simply because between vacations, COVID, and other issues, there hasn't been a chance for the press corps to really try to nail down the president's views on this.
And Ed, while I have you there at the White House, President Biden was also asked by Pelley if he was going to run again in 2024. What did he say, and what should we read into his answer?
Well, he says he intends to, but that he hasn't made a final decision. If you think that's him being cute or indecisive, that's one view. But in reality, this is the way President Biden, either as president, vice president, or senator, has often acted when it comes to big decisions. He knows that fate has a way of intervening. As he said in the interview, the death of his wife and young daughter right after he was elected to the U.S. Senate, the death of Beau Biden just a few years ago as he was contemplating a run for president in 2016. He knows that life has a way of interfering with ambition. And so while he says it's his intention, he hasn't sat to have the big, thorough conversations with the First Lady, with Hunter Biden, the rest of the Biden family, his sister and brothers, and with senior White House staff, who are still anticipating a re-election campaign that will begin or will be announced at some point after the midterm elections. But they also know that this is a guy who needs the time and space to think about it in a more formal way. And he says, to Scott at least, that he hasn't taken the time yet to do that. If he doesn't run, of course, well, we'll be spending almost every day here on Red and Blue talking about that.
Indeed, we will. And we'll see what the results of the midterms are and what kind of impact they have on making those decisions about running again for him and for a lot of other Republicans, too, I'm sure. Scott MacFarlane and Ed O'Keefe, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. Some Democrats are thanking Senator Lindsey Graham for a midterm surprise. We'll talk to a Senate Democrat running for re-election about that coming right up. You're streaming Red and Blue, reporting across the political divide.
An original CBS Reports documentary.
I was entitled to equal pay for equal work under the law.
Does the Supreme Court's power need to be checked?
9 Supreme Court justices, 5 of them said no, she's not entitled. That's not right.
Calls to fix the court tend to go along with the politics of the moment.
Republican-appointed justices have all tended to go in one direction, with the Democratic-appointed justices tending to go in another.
Even though it's only 9 justices, it takes 5 of them to make the law of the land.
Does it have political impact? True. Political intent? Probably not true.
If the American people don't trust the judgment of their court, that's a real problem for our democracy.
An original CBS Reports documentary streaming now.
I'm here for you.
Take an orange? Yes. You do? Here.
America needs drivers.
And we're here to help.
What are you learning from Girls on the Run?
Never give up and to always keep trying.
If I'm a parent in your state, I'm like, what's Congress doing?
Beyond this gate is actually the border with Ukraine.
We've seen people not just opening their hearts to Ukrainian refugees, but their homes.
Where will you go?
Nobody says it like Gail.
If we can't talk about it and we can't make changes, when can we talk about it?
Gail King, CBS Mornings. Everything your morning should be.
When weather turns extreme,
The 150-mile-per-hour hurricane is still churning north.
every second counts.
Massive and rapidly intensifying.
CBS News and the Weather Channel bringing virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
Well over 9 feet. This is not survivable.
You'll have time to get prepared.
You want to have the advantage on severe weather days.
It just may save your life.
CBS News and extreme weather. Feel the forecast.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
We found it.
You're kidding me?
We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
Welcome back to Red and Blue. I'm Caitlin Huey-Burns. Since Roe v. Wade was overturned, Democrats have been energized, and Republican candidates have been mostly silent. Democrats are seeing a surge in voter registration since the Supreme Court decision, and if you watch ads from Republican candidates in competitive districts, they're running on anything but that landmark ruling. And then there's a new bill from Senator Lindsey Graham. Last week, the Republican senator, who isn't facing re-election himself, unveiled a federal 15-week abortion ban, putting some of his colleagues in competitive Senate races and races across the country in a difficult position and giving Democrats something to run on. And joining me now is Democratic Senator Tammy Duckworth of Illinois. Senator, good to see you. Thanks for being here. I want to ask you about Democrats' message on abortion heading into the midterms, and specifically, what is that message? Is it elect Democrats and they'll be able to codify Roe into law, or is it elect Democrats and you'll be able to prevent Republicans from codifying restrictions?
Well, I think it's both. And that's the important part, because as I've traveled throughout Illinois, especially during August, and I went to a lot of parts of Illinois that are very red districts, what people have said to me is, in those areas, they've said, hey, you know what? I don't want a nationwide ban on abortion. I live here in Illinois. This is a state that has decided to give me freedom of choice, and I like that. I've never voted on this issue before, but I will this time. And these are independent voters, Republican women for the most part. And then in other places, I've had folks who are saying, hey, you know what? I want to codify Roe into law, and that might be more of the suburbs or even the blue parts of the state. So it's really about where people are, but overall, the overwhelming message is people believe in women's right to choice, and they don't like the government coming in and telling you what you can and cannot do with your own body.
But I think what people have seen throughout this process is that Democrats are limited in what they can actually do. I mean, unless you have a 60 votes in the Senate, you can't codify Roe. What do you make of that?
Well, what I tell folks then is help us get to 52 Democratic senators, and then we can lift or at least temporarily suspend the filibuster, and then we can codify Roe. And I also, what I say to them is talk to your friends and your family members in red states and tell them they need to vote to codify Roe. We put Roe on the floor already once this congressional session. Not a single Republican voted for it, even those who claim that they were pro-choice, and they should be voting for it.
Lindsey Graham, of course, introduced legislation last week that would issue restrictions on abortion, federal restrictions on abortion at 15 weeks. But we do see in some public polling that voters do support some restrictions. Do Democrats, or some parameters, do Democrats risk alienating voters by not supporting some limits?
Well, by supporting Roe, you are supporting limits. Roe had limits in it, and that is what I say to voters and that's what voters are telling me, is they liked Roe. They wanted Roe to remain the law of the land because it allowed women to have choice, but it also still had limits as well. And people are very, very much upset that Roe has been overturned and that we no longer trust women to make decisions about their own bodies.
And how decisive of an issue do you think this is? If Democrats are able to hold the House and the Senate, will it be because of abortion rights?
I think that this is really definitely going to be one of the most decisive issues. I will tell you that when I talk to folks all across Illinois, it's top 1 or 2 every time I talk to folks. It's really interesting. I did my RV tour of my state in the red parts of my state, and I thought I would be talking about the same things I usually talk about when I'm in farm country, crop insurance and talking about trade and commodities and fixing locks and dams on the Mississippi River. But every single stop I made, somebody brought up Roe and how upset they were that Roe had been overturned. And this was in parts of the state that Roe had never been the decision-making topic for voters when they go to the polls. But what they're telling me is this is significant for me this cycle, and I will vote on it.
Interesting. While abortion rights seem to be something that is galvanizing Democrats at this point, you see, across the spectrum, voters are saying that the economy and inflation are top concerns. On 60 Minutes last night, President Biden said that, inflation has kind of leveled out, but it's still at 8%. I mean, what do you tell constituents who are looking at those numbers and saying that everything just costs way too much?
Well, I tell them that they're right. Things do cost way too much. And in particular, two industries in particular have made record profits during the pandemic. That is the pharmaceutical industry and the gas and oil companies. They made record profits. In fact, so much so that they have been out on a stock buyback spree, and they've been giving their top executives all of these huge bonuses. And what I say to them is we're working as hard as we can to bring down inflation. We're starting with prescription drug pricing. The Inflation Reduction Act is very popular in my state as I talk to folks, especially among senior citizens who are looking to see those costs of prescription drugs drop. I've also introduced my own bill to go after price gouging at the gas pump. And that is also very popular. And so when I talk to constituents, what they're saying is, we just want to make sure that you see what we're going through. And I tell them, I absolutely do, and I'm doing everything I can to bring down prices. Now, I will tell you that gas prices has been dropping in my state. Downstate Illinois, it's down around $3.68. Upstate, up around Chicago, it's a little bit higher, but it's also been dropping there as well. And I hope that trend will continue.
The issue of prescription drug prices, so critical, but that's an issue that predated these inflation numbers. What are Democrats doing to bring down the costs of things like rent, things like everyday goods? I mean, that's where people are seeing inflation.
Well, and part of what's happening there is we need to repair our manufacturing infrastructure. I'm from the industrial Midwest. This is something we've seen and been talking about for a long time, that so much of our manufacturing and our logistical supply chain has moved overseas. We need to bring that back to the United States. And we have been working as hard as we can to bring those manufacturers back to onto U.S. soil. In fact, we're attracting foreign companies coming in, and the passage of the CHIPS Act is something that is going to move us in that right direction, and people are very supportive of the passage of the CHIPS Act.
Senator, one quick question on the president. Last night, also in that 60 Minutes interview, he said that he has always planned to run for president again in 2024, but essentially hasn't decided yet. Do you want him to run?
If the president runs, I will support Joe Biden. He's a great campaigner. I think he would be great for everyone who'll be on the ticket with him. You know, I've been a Joe Biden supporter. I would love it if he would run, and I would be a supporter of his.
All right, Senator Tammy Duckworth, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And when we come back, campaigning on immigration. We'll go live to the border next. You're streaming Red and Blue.
An original CBS Reports documentary.
I was entitled to equal pay for equal work under the law.
Does the Supreme Court's power need to be checked?
9 Supreme Court justices, 5 of them said no, she's not entitled. That's not right.
Calls to fix the court tend to go along with the politics of the moment.
Republican-appointed justices have all tended to go in one direction, with the Democratic-appointed justices tending to go in another.
Even though it's only 9 justices, it takes 5 of them to make the law of the land.
Does it have political impact? True. Political intent? Probably not true.
If the American people don't trust the judgment of their court, that's a real problem for our democracy.
An original CBS Reports documentary streaming now.
I'm here for you. Take an orange?
Cheers.
You do? Here.
America needs drivers.
And we're here to help.
What are you learning from Girls on the Run?
Never give up and to always keep trying.
If I'm a parent in your state, I'm like, what's Congress doing? Beyond this gate is actually the border with Ukraine. We've seen people not just opening their hearts to Ukrainian refugees, but their homes. Where will you go?
Nobody says it like Gail.
If we can't talk about it and we can't make changes, when can we talk about it?
Gail King, CBS Mornings. Everything your morning should be.
When weather turns extreme,
The 150-mile-per-hour hurricane is still churning north.
every second counts.
Massive and rapidly intensifying.
CBS News and the Weather Channel bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
Well over 9 feet. This is not survivable.
You'll have time to get prepared.
You want to have the advantage on severe weather days.
It just may save your life.
CBS News and extreme weather. Feel the forecast.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
Yeah.
We found it.
You're kidding me?
We got it. We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
Welcome back to Red and Blue. I'm Caitlin Huey Burns. Republican governors in Texas and Florida have been raising alarm bells about the border. And in the final days of the election, they're now sending migrants to blue states. So let's go now to the border, where we will find our CBS News colleague, Manuel Bojorquez. He's in El Paso, Texas. Manny, good to see you. Thanks so much for being here. So you are at a migrant facility in El Paso. Can you tell us what you've been seeing there all day, and what is that city doing to help migrants there?
Well, they've clearly been overwhelmed. In the last few weeks, there was a point where migrants were having to sleep on the streets because the shelters were full. Even the motels that some of them have been allowed to stay at were getting too full. So the city set up this migrant shelter here where they are giving people food, but also helping with getting them to their final destinations, places where they have relatives, or court proceedings, as most of these are asylum seekers, people from Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Cuba, which have no diplomatic ties with the U.S., and therefore it's harder for this country to deport them. We've spoken with some of those people who are grateful for the opportunity to be headed north, where some of them have families.
And Manny, when we were talking earlier, you mentioned that some of them are being bused to northern locations. Can you kind of explain, for people who might be looking at that and saying, what's the difference between that and what these Republican governors are doing that we've seen make big headlines?
That, of course, is part of that great debate that's happening right now, of course. Here's what I can tell you. In El Paso, the city officials here tell me that they have been in constant communication with the local leaders and charitable organizations at the destinations where these migrants are going, for example, New York and Chicago, so that they have fair warning and that they are ready to absorb them, to receive them. The difference, according to some, is that the GOP governors, including those of Texas and Florida, have been sending migrants with little to no warning, and those jurisdictions have been caught off guard.
Yeah, that's a really important point, especially as you've been talking about the resources required and those required to give to these people that are coming over. Manny, I know you've been doing a lot of reporting on this. Just really quickly, what is kind of the driver at this point when you're talking to people there? Why are they coming here? And are they mentioning U.S. policy at all?
Well, some have actually mentioned the bus rides. They're hearing that the buses here will help you get to your families or other destinations. But largely, it's the multiple crises that are afflicting these areas. Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua, dictatorships there. People say there's no work, there's no money, there's political persecution. We should point out that even though many of these people are being allowed to proceed on with asylum claims, the Biden administration is also deporting many people coming from Mexico and other parts of Central America.
All right, Manuel Bajorquez, thank you so much for your reporting in El Paso. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And I want to bring in Ed O'Keefe again. He's, of course, our senior White House political correspondent to join us now to talk a little bit about this and kind of the political consequences of what we're seeing. Ed, there was an interesting segment on Face the Nation where Margaret Brennan talked to Henry Cuellar, who's a Democrat from Texas. And he said, look, it was criticizing what he called kind of political stunts, but also said that this is an issue that needs a solution. So you have that going on, but you also have governors like Gavin Newsom in California urging the Justice Department to get involved here. So I'm curious, from your perspective and reporting at the White House, does the White House see this as a problem? And are they intending to go as far as someone like Newsom is in trying to get the Justice Department involved?
No sign that they're going to do that just yet, Caitlin. They denounced what Governors DeSantis and Abbott did last week, saying that that's just not the way to do this, that these people shouldn't be treated in this way, and that if Republicans are concerned about immigration policy, they should be working with Democrats here in Washington to try to enact changes in immigration laws. The White House likes to point out that on day one, and this is true, they put out a piece of legislation designed to lay out the president's comprehensive immigration reform plans. But that's about all they did. They put it out there. Did they ever really push for it? Did they call for hearings? Did they make it the subject of top meetings with House and Senate leadership? No. But they did it, in essence, so that when stuff like this would happen, they could turn around and say, well, we've proposed something and Republicans haven't worked with us on it. Well, what have Democrats exactly done on it either? Given everything else they were working on, infrastructure, the climate change and healthcare legislation that finally got passed, all the other bipartisan work this summer, you can appreciate that perhaps there wasn't enough time in the calendar or mental and literal energy and focus to be able to do that. But it is one of those lingering issues that Washington has yet to address, and certainly the Democratic Party has not tried to do since it's had total control at the beginning of last year.
And as we're kind of talking about all of this, I know immigration is something that affects everyone, not just Latino voters, but it's often talked about in politics kind of through that lens. And Republicans have been making lots of ground with Latino voters. Again, not a monolithic group by any means. But does a move like this from DeSantis and Abbott in Texas risk alienating those voters? Are we seeing any kind of, pushback or backlash for Republicans? Or is this an issue where, they believe that going this route is something that has appealed to them?
Given where these two Republican governors are from, Texas and Florida, two places where Republicans are doing well with Latinos, and where polling shows a good chunk of them are concerned about issues of public safety and immigration and border control, no, there's not a problem for those governors in making that decision necessarily. In Florida, there's the potential for blowback, given that many of these people who were sent to Martha's Vineyard are Venezuelan refugees. This has become a newer and far more complex local political issue, especially in South Florida, where the number of Venezuelan refugees and immigrants is growing, and growing because of the myriad issues that Manny mentioned. Political issues, economic, climate. They've become a growing concern there in addition to the Cuban-American community. So there's the potential, and certainly Democrats are pushing the idea, there's a potential for real political backlash for Governor DeSantis in Florida. But overall, if you look at the numbers of, when you look at polling of Latino voters, they say this is an issue of concern for them, not necessarily the top one. Part of the reason Republicans are doing so well with them overall this year is because of the focus on economic concerns. There's a belief that Democrats and the president haven't necessarily done enough to address rising prices and economic recovery. They're losing ground with men who are overwhelmingly, at least among Latinos, concerned about economic issues, and that's why you're seeing some erosion there. And you said it yourself, immigration is not the driving issue, not the predominant issue, not the one on which most Latino voters will cast ballots, but for many it will be a values check. Which party seems to be taking this issue seriously and doing something about an issue that affects people from where I'm from? Going forward, that'll be a real test for both parties.
All right, Ed O'Keefe, so nice. We had you on twice. Thank you so much for being with us today. We really appreciate it.
Happy Monday. Take care.
And that does it for today. You can stream Red and Blue Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern. And a reminder, if you want to watch previous episodes of the program, you can catch them anytime on the CBS News website. Just head to cbsnews.com/redandblue.
An original CBS Reports documentary.
I was entitled to equal pay for equal work under the law.
Does the Supreme Court's power need to be checked?
9 Supreme Court justices, 5 of them said no, she's not entitled. That's not right.
Calls to fix the court tend to go along with the politics of the moment.
Republican-appointed justices have all tended to go in one direction, with the Democratic-appointed justices tending to go in another.
Even though it's only 9 justices, it takes 5 of them to make the law of the land.
Does it have political impact? True. Political intent? Probably not true.
If the American people don't trust the judgment of their court, that's a real problem for our democracy.
An original CBS Reports documentary streaming now.
I'm here for you. Take an orange? Yes. You do? Here.
America needs drivers.
And we're here to help.
What are you learning from Girls on the Run?
Never give up and to always keep trying.
If I'm a parent in your state, I'm like, what's Congress doing? Beyond this gate is actually the border with Ukraine. We've seen people not just opening their hearts to Ukrainian refugees, but their homes. Where will you go?
Nobody says it like Gail.
If we can't talk about it and we can't make changes, when can we talk about it?
Gail King, CBS Mornings. Everything your morning should be.
When weather turns extreme,
The 150-mile-per-hour hurricane is still churning north.
every second counts.
Massive and rapidly intensifying.
CBS News and the Weather Channel bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
Well over 9 feet. This is not survivable.
You'll have time to get prepared.
You want to have the advantage on severe weather days.
It just may save your life.
CBS News and extreme weather. Feel the forecast.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
We found it.
You're kidding me?
We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back